The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Dan Aston. I'm the Global Marketing Manager here at Corso. Before I pass you over to my colleague Alan Burnett for today's presentation, I just wanted to let everybody know that you are on mute to cut down on the background noise. If you have any questions at any time during the presentation, we should have some time to answer those at the end of the session. So if you submit your questions using the questions box, which you should see on the GoToWebinar panel, we can take a look at those at the end. And with that, I'll pass you over to Alan for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alan Burnett from Corso. I'm responsible for all the operations at Corso, so I look after the consulting and the delivery of our consulting services and support in those areas of the business. So some of you may have come across me before, maybe not, but this is one of our number of our webinar sessions that we're running. This one's perhaps more generic than a number of them, but worthwhile visiting some topics again, I think. It's going to last about an hour or so, in fact, probably 45 minutes, and then some time for questions at the end. And as Dan said, please feel free to ask them, and we'll get around to answering them. So the first thing I want to do is talk about just a little bit about Corso and who we are. Some of you know who we are, some of you don't. We've been around 5 years now, and the founders come from an enterprise architecture and strategic planning background. Hence, today's session is around how enterprise architecture underpins strategic planning. This is kind of our bread and butter and what we've been involved in for many years. So we come from an IBM Telelogic Popkin software, if anybody remembers that lineage. Used to work with tools like System Architect, but also more around how to implement and how to deliver enterprise architecture tooling and enterprise architecture practices within organizations. Over the years, we've been a constant board member through the Open Group and OMG and others as well, as we've sought to work with multiple standards and worked on multiple standards, things like BPMN and Archimate, etc. So Corso is a product company with some professional services to support that product. It's around our SaaS-based strategic planning tools. So that includes the enterprise architecture and innovation management elements. Although today is not a tool demonstration or a tool discussion, these tools implement the kind of topics I'm going to talk about today. And other topics include our tool sets around portfolio management, business process modeling, as we look further forward. And the tools we focus on are now browser-based, multi-platform, so you can use them on an iPad or a Mac or a PC, using modern technologies, HTML5, non-app-based, and then APIs linking into an ecosystem, an eco-structure. So we look to connect up and to innovation, pure innovation, product innovation tools, and down into delivery tools and planning tools. So it's part of an overall ecosystem, and that's a product set we focus on. So we've got professional services, global presence across the UK, where I'm based, and the US and Australia as well. In fact, we have these webinars go out to all those 3 countries, so the people like you sitting in those presentations. But it does mean that we can support our users throughout the world. That's a mixture of ourselves directly and also through some partners. We have a strong partner network. Again, as it's part of an ecosystem, we have to have other organizations that can help support us delivering an overall solution, not just the topic I'm talking about today. And even that topic alone requires a whole bunch of partners as you try and drive an enterprise architecture practice. It can't be done by tooling alone. It can't be done just by consulting alone. And SaaS and hosting are our other elements that we have, including some of the older IBM products as well. So that's Corso. Today is about ideas to delivery, how enterprise architecture underpins strategic planning. So I suppose it's probably right to look at a couple of things first. Firstly, what is strategic planning? And secondly, what is enterprise architecture? And most people, I guess, have definitions around these things that are on the call today, so I won't go massively into these. This comes from Wikipedia, of course. It's what we do without it. It's the first point of call for defining things. But it's The definition is pretty good. I mean, it's planning an organisation process, defining its strategy. So looking where you're going to go, its direction, how it makes those decisions, and how it pursues its strategy. So very broadly, which direction you want to go in. And that tends to be through looking at, for instance, what things will differentiate the organisation for its competitors in a few years' time. What value propositions will it offer to customers, and what resources will it need to implement those. So all of these things are important for driving how the business will look in the future. And especially if you look at things like the digital economy now, where what we want to deliver, we kind of know where we want to get to, but actually how we deliver that is fluid. So without a strategy, without understanding the direction the organisation wants to go in, maybe they want to improve services, they want to cross-sell their products better, they want to improve support, they want to be able to touch the customer at all points during the life cycle. All these things are broad strategic needs for a digital organisation. But actually how you do that today and how you might do that tomorrow will differ in terms of implementation. But that, from a planning perspective, that's for somebody else to work out. So from an overall organisational perspective, then we can understand what underpins that strategy and how we actually might go around to deliver that strategy. And that's kind of where, in the middle, sits that enterprise architecture element about we have a strategy, and then how do we take that broad view and translate it into effective change. Okay, so again, this is a Gartner definition. So it's looking at that future state, now starting to look at how we might implement that future state. So everybody has a brownfield site, well, most. And so our current state is where we are. And as we move forward, we have to identify the gaps and plan how we're going to invest and how we're going to fill those gaps, irrespective of what technology actually delivers at what point. So we need to understand what we're going to do. So it's going to be business driven, but with an understanding of the IT infrastructure that delivers that. So it's around thinking business capability and processes, the information required, what technology capabilities do that today, and which ones maybe do that tomorrow. Look at particular solutions. So with any enterprise architecture program, there's always a series of steps you might take to do that. There's one of the definitions from Gartner, and looks at a 6-phase program that chief architects and teams have to establish to evolve an EA program. And although they're not always the same for everybody, then it's again that EA program is taking that strategy and making it deliver. So the first step is to plan, strategize, get involved in that planning process, assess your current state, assess what competencies you have today, what people are in business, what they can do in terms of strategy, and then look to gain approval through building up a map or a blueprint or a connection between that strategy and how you might implement it. And along the way, it's all about gaining approval, understanding bringing people along on that path with you. So enterprise architecture is not just about understanding that process, but also who's involved in that process and who needs to be brought along. So typically, when we work with organisations, we look for the stakeholders within an organisation, and enterprise architects, that's one group. But there's multi-groups, including the project management office, the CO office, strategic office. There's all these different competing elements, and then down into the delivery phase. So there's the development teams and the solution architects, and how do we interface into those. So enterprise architecture is all about that element and the implementation of that, taking that strategic view, looking at the gaps and filling those gaps, and understanding what investment plans and business cases that we need to put in place to deliver that. And then the last phase of that is to sort of start again and operate, evolve, improve and refine your efforts. So in essence, it's a bridge between the strategy defined by a board to how it's going to be implemented by the organisation. So it bridges the gap between new strategy ideas, where we want to go, and the execution of those ideas. So let's show through a couple of pictures up on here. It's just a very simple example from a non-enterprise architecture world. It's actually the New York High Line. 20. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but I walked it quite recently, so that's what's in my mind. having a grand vision or a plan that going to take something that's very disused and disconnected with its current environment, make something of it that is incorporated into the redesign and development of the whole area of Manhattan and an elevated garden. So the idea is, how do you go from a grand plan of taking something derelict and making something good of it to actually implementing it? And you can kind of think of the process that you might go through in terms of the people you need to convince, the money and investment plans you need to find, the processes, the technology and the partners that have to be involved in doing that. So it's a similar kind of notion that the enterprise architecture, or the bit that allows us to understand the bigger picture. How do we make those decisions about who we involve and how we involve them? That's the EAPs. Okay, we'll look at that in a little bit more detail a bit later in the presentation. So going back to more, I guess, corporate or organisational view of the world, it is that they describe as a point and shoot between strategy and delivery. Yeah. As part of our tool set, we have ideas management, which, as you build your strategy and you elicit ideas from the organisation, you want to connect those ideas to that delivery, and it's that point and shoot piece through what the business needs to what the IT organisation must do to support it. That is our architecture model that we build. So Gartner talks a lot about business outcomes in driving EA. There's probably a whole other presentation about do I need to build huge models of huge enterprise architecture models and go through a classic process, or do I need to focus on what the business needs to improve? And that's where the strategic piece comes in. So by understanding those outcomes, we can understand from the strategy, we can understand what we need to be able to deliver. So if we focus on the business needs, we'll be able to prime the IT and technology service as well as the application portfolios. And that's in order to achieve what we set out in order to deliver, not only the organisation as a whole through its security, but then filtering down into the different departments and parts of the organisation that will do that. So EA, the future of the enterprise architect, is in a leadership role, and there's another one of the series we discussed around Vanguard architects and the growing the growing group of those that focused on digital service in the future. The organisation through digitization and the Internet of Things, etc. It's EA being a leadership role in driving that strategy based upon business goals and drivers from the business, driving that strategy through to delivery. So we're looking at enterprise architecture being, and I'll talk a bit about maturity in a couple of slides along, where not everybody's at this situation, but what we're trying to get to, and there's no harm in trying to focus on where we might want to go, is looking at a breed of architect that are looking to encompass the strategic guidance and then providing expert guidance for that CXO suite. So it's getting the importance of EA out there. So it's looking at business outcomes and trying to understand how we can deliver. It's all about transformation. So so in terms of our architecture, just a couple of broad slides here around, just to reiterate what we talked about understanding the current state and the future state, looking at the gaps and the roadmaps that allow us to take us from where we are now to the future and provide a model for transition. And that might be represented, and I didn't say that, so there were no tool slides, but there are a couple of slides from our product here looking at a capability map and then drilling down to a roadmap. So I haven't really talked about tooling here, but tooling is what underpins that element. And to do effective planning and planning a roadmap, because a roadmap enables an organisation to tie the strategy to the deliverables we can deliver. So the enterprise architecture phase, it's crucial for delivering on and prioritising those. So roadmaps are a very important aspect of how we present our findings through that architecture process. So if we've got a strategic plan and we know we've got an architecture, so the strategic plan is very visible from an organisation perspective. The actual enterprise architecture models themselves may be less so, but maybe internalised. Then our roadmaps is how they're then presented to deliver on our objectives. So they're visuals that represent the future vision of the business, and that might be in terms of delivery of capability or delivery of technology, but it allows us to visualize how we're going to get from our point A to our point B. So in terms of the definition of the strategic planning view, the enterprise architecture being the delivery piece, with EA being the bit part in the center, and looking at roadmaps to deliver our end product, and focusing on outcomes and then driving the business through EA, it really does depend upon the level of maturity to understand where, if I mean, each of you on the call have your own individual place in terms of where you think you are in delivering an enterprise architecture or building an enterprise architecture practice. And it may be from, you know, an early formation of a team or an individual sometimes with a remit to look at how this might work, all the way through to kind of your what Gartner would call your vanguard architect, where EA is ubiquitous. Okay, so I'm not saying that everybody's in any of those phases. You'll be grouped across those different levels. So it's worth thinking, and I've been working in this space for some years. Often it seems impossible to be able to get any value from enterprise architecture. I think one of the issues is working out where you are in the maturity model to about what you can expect to deliver, and probably align align the value that you're going to produce from enterprise architecture around those different maturity levels, because these practices don't have much chance. We've done a lot of work with organisations looking at building up centres of excellence around enterprise architecture. It's pretty tough going. And Gartner reckons 18 months to 2 years to get the EA practice up and running. Well, I think you can do that. You will need a lot of support to do that, but then there's a period probably of developing it and refining it after that. So you know, through that time you'll need some help and some guidance to do that. But if we look at this maturity model, as you can see, it starts on the left-hand side with sort of level 1 is non-existent. So it's probably not quite unfair, but it's, you know, it's create some sort of EA team, initial values planned. So you're just getting started. There's probably a few individuals within the organisation that have an understanding. You can probably identify quite quickly some small gaps. It's probably done informally and often undocumented. And probably by undocumented, I mean things might be in spreadsheets. So you might have, you know, application lists and spreadsheets, or you know, probably there's a few diagrams. This is separate from where you know, departments or you know, technology guys just create documents and solution architecture documents. That's still from an enterprise architecture perspective. It's what I consider non-existent, because it's not a coherent and consistent model. As you move through your levels, you've got a reactive level. So the EA practice is in place, and it's often focused on ad hoc technical issues. So again, probably more solution architecture oriented. But any architectural work is done across the organisation, but sporadically. Okay? So it's not what you're not doing is driving the business from it. You know, you're building some models to understand some of the problems and issues. And this is often from a tooling perspective where we might start to come in. It says level 3 functioning is EA tool usage, but that's, you know, it's a rollout of an EA tool across a whole group of users plus non-architects. But in level 2, the reactive piece is where probably becoming quite often where you might have some spreadsheets and Visio. There's been some awareness of enterprise architecture over a period of time within the organisation, and with an organisation is looking to move from that spreadsheet based to perhaps a repository-based tool where you can do the analysis of the models on a broader scale. So you're not just looking at particular projects, but you're looking more broadly across the IT landscape, at the moment, and hopefully into the business landscape later. But it's fairly reactive, and you could focus on things like cost savings at this point as well. So as you move through those phases into functioning, that's the business outcome. EA practice is in place, so we have the centre of excellence allows us to show some value in terms of business wants to do something, and this is the enterprise architecture function can respond back on how to do it. And there's some models, EA models in place to be able to do that. So all the basics are in place, and this is what we get involved in. The centre of excellence is the basics, and for us the basics are kind of you have a process in place. You have an idea of the kind of diagram types you're going to use to represent things. You've got your repository in place. You've got the central point where people can go to find information. You've got a collaboration group in place where people can start to feedback if this architecture is right or wrong or needs improving. It's a functioning view. And it might take 18 months, 2 years to get 18 months to get to this point, to be fully functioning. But it's going to, that's the process that you're going through. But there's still gaps in really getting it out to, I guess, the rest of the business. And that's where you get into level 4s, level 5s. And again, this is we see this less often, I guess, as we in our really mature organisations where the Centre of Excellence has built this repeatable process, and everybody understands it. It's used within the organisation. There's no rogue architecture going on. Level 3, we still see elements of rogue architecture. So I was in an organisation a couple of months back, and we built an EA practice, or a small one. But then we found there was some rogue EA practicing going on. By rogue, I mean there's individual areas or parts of the business that have built their own models. And then you get a political kind of clash at that point, which kind of stops you really going anywhere in terms of this maturity model until that's fixed. So integrators, when you're sort of out of that process, and it's a great way of doing it. I think level 5 is where you're into this, where EA is driving change. And I've not seen every EA practice, obviously, out there, probably a small percentage of them really, but it does seem this is unusual. Okay? But it's where you should want to go to. It's where we're trying to focus on. So it's where enterprise architecture is inherent in making that change. So when I talk about a full picture from going from strategic planning to delivery, and everybody in the business buying into that, then that's kind of where we are with this ubiquitous model. Okay? But just because we're not there, or a lot of us aren't there, doesn't mean that it's not. There's value to be had from the other areas. It's just you get more value to the business at level 5 than you would at level 1. So digging a little bit deeper into our ideas to delivery piece and looking at this kind of strategic planning to delivery, the point and shoot piece through architecture. A couple of slides here, they're relatively complicated, so I'm just going to sort of step through them fairly quickly. But it does help to highlight how, right at the start, I talked about ideas to delivery and strategic planning, enterprise architecture underpinning the strategic planning process. This is really what we're looking at here. We're at the very top level. What we're looking about doing is doing the right things. Okay, so this is a phrase that was coined some years back about the ideas, initiative, and strategic planning, the vision and goals. It's about doing the right things. But using the enterprise architecture to connect to those elements. And I will talk about some of these ideas and initiatives element right at the top, some of these campaigns, innovation campaigns. I've got a slide on that. It's a very useful exercise to plug into these things that are going on increasingly within organizations. They are trying to understand the source of knowledge. That's the people within the organization are the source of knowledge. So quite often they know what's going on. I mean, I've been on a number of projects where with a lot of architecture modelling, but actually one of the more interesting parts was getting people's views on what was wrong in the organisation, not just from a process perspective, but often from interfaces and integrations between products and programs. It's very interesting to find that sort of stuff. So these ideas and this teasing out what the organisation needs to do by using tools to do that. One of those is our own platform to do that. and that's very useful in terms of feeding into or feeding from the vision and goals. And they both feed into the enterprise architecture piece. So enterprise architecture is that model, it's that process, capability process, application technology model that is our blueprint. And as we move forward with that blueprint, we look to understand how we're going to make changes to fit with the vision and goal and strategies that we build. And so we look at how that might fit with the current projects and programs. If our architecture, and we quite often use the Archimate approach, which allows us to tie into some of the work packages and programs that are going on, just to understand how we might think into that project prioritization and programming, and then working out what we will do in terms of the programs, projects and programming. So it's about all these feeds coming in from the vision and strategy down into the work package and programs. And there's a big white box at the bottom there that says, things, work to be done. And that's kind of the operational stuff. Okay, so the important thing, I guess, here is traceability. So we can trace from top level down to delivery. It's also important to do what I might say is just enough EA. So not to try and model everything, get to the sort of right level of analysis. So if you're looking at visions and goals, look at the architecture that fits behind that. I certainly advocate use of capability type models rather than sort of detailed process flows and views and high level. I guess that's why I like the Archimate approach so much. It's a relatively high level in terms of the kind of objects that you manage and create, which means you can do just about enough. And obviously there's tooling. That's where our tooling comes into place. That kind of says this is the level of tooling that you need. It's quick to use, it's online, that sort of stuff. So it's about being fairly agile in that process, so you can hook into the work programs. If you make that too complicated, and I think certainly that's what we've done in the past with some of the tools we had to work with, then it can get a bit overbearing. So as long as we have traceability between our initiatives all the way through their delivery, then we can actually can feed back what works, what doesn't work, and this loop is kept going. So it's more likely to be people more likely to buy into it if it's a more simplistic approach. Again, there's probably another presentation about what sort of level of detail that you want to go into to deliver this. But then as you drill down further, then that enterprise architecture piece, as we do this sort of analysis and we build on that sort of transition planning, this is where your sort of plateaus and the gaps come in to try and understand where architecture is today, where it might be tomorrow. We can start to review the high-level objectives, map those to the capabilities, look at resource their effect, the people their effects, all those elements I discussed at the start about understanding who's impacted and how we can actually deliver particular capabilities as part of our new strategy and do our target states. Okay, so what I've just done is expanded on this piece. So as you get to a level of maturity here, then the EA team can also play a strategic role, because it is the EA team is the place where this information is held centrally and has the traceability. It also means we can look at we can understand what exists today, what patterns there are out there, what technology, reference models that we have, the patterns, build up a library of guiding principles within the organisation. So as every new project begins, we've got a very clear high-level overview of what the project will deliver, with any patterns and principles that might be in place. It allows us then to govern that. So, after all, the enterprise architecture, there's a process here which kind of just loops around. It is a living life cycle. Strategy will change. All strategy, all capabilities should be relatively stable, but the strategy might change, and we may need to have some adjustments to that. So, as that life cycle begins, it's continually beginning. It might reset yearly on year with budgets, etc., but it's recurring. And the transition plan provides input into project prioritization and planning, since those projects are aligned with the transition plan. So this then determines which projects are funded, what we could enter into. So as we get into that funding stage, business planning and looking at the solution we might do that to deliver that down into the delivery model. So as these solutions are developed, and certainly what we found is as you build these models, then you're not going to create everything at once. So you do need to work through this iteration a few times. You start to develop solutions, and those solutions have common building blocks and common patterns and common constraints and guidelines. They're the things that probably underpin most of our architecture. So you can start to build up your architecture through running through this process a few times. And then when the standard assets aren't suitable for a project, then you can start to either build them, or if your EA governance function is working well, then you can track any exceptions to that. So it's particularly useful in, I guess, in organisations that have involved with multiple countries, or have multiple departments where you want repeatable kind of processes and applications. So it's okay if you can't deliver what you want to deliver in a particular region with the IT having asked for a set exception. That's still governance. That's still controlling the architecture as you move forward. You're just still doing it in a controlled manner. So governance using the architecture model is about taking the standard models. If you need to step outside of those, then a formal process, governance process, has to take place. Okay, so, but it means that we can examine and understand where these exceptions take place, as opposed to kind of rogue developments. And we have to be particularly careful with a lot of the business-driven IT that's out there. So now you can buy an app to do something, or buy an online or a SaaS-based tool to do something very specific. Then we have to be very careful as we build our architecture that we understand that sort of dark IT, which is in some cases make up 30% of the IT spend is done outside of this part. So that's why we have to track back to our vision, goals, and strategies, so we can understand where things are being developed, have some control and hold on, understand where this sort of darker IT in our organisations is being developed. So this helps keep our EA current and useful if we can keep it up to date. So that's part of our collaboration piece that we're keen on, is ensuring this cycle continues. So if we understand what work packages and programs and what's going on in the organisation, then we can start to keep our architecture fresh and build it as we go. So, and then any periodic updates to the organisation's vision and strategy, and we can reassess our model and see if we're still going in the right direction, or if we need to replan things. So it's a relatively complicated diagram, but ultimately we're just trying to match our goals and vision, goals, and strategy through enterprise architecture, govern that, have some sort of transition planning, and then loop it around into our operations team, back into strategic delivery, so we can understand keeping it current and live. So that's an end-to-end EA process. Going right back to the top section of that, just a couple of minutes on the innovation piece. Some of you may have seen this in other presentations, some of you may not. We found it very useful in order to get at that. I talked about the dark IT and where people are building stuff and building planning. It's getting out to the business and understanding people in the business what ideas and thoughts and innovation they have, and manage that process in some way. So typically, an innovation process has traditionally been run by a small team, and they will ask people to collaborate on that, on getting some ideas around a particular theme. Maybe it's improving efficiency in a certain area, or there's a particular manual process that needs changing, or it's just broader, a bunch of great ideas about what we can do. You quite often find what people are looking at, what people are trying to, I guess, circumnavigate our governance by buying IT for a particular business reason. If you can involve yourself in the innovation management process, then you can start to find out where these different needs and requirements are, and you can build that in. It just gives you a stronger hook back into what's going on out there in the business. And the innovation process, so our tooling that we deliver, we provide, allows us to manage that process and help get into the IT. And rather than going into the whole detail, I mean, there's some key areas here. There's kind of launching a campaign, so you say, well, we're going to make some sort of, we want some sort of innovation. Get a sponsor, put some ideas and metrics around it, and then you send it out to everybody to find out what's going on, and they will respond back, hopefully, but to crowd and rate what they think is going to happen. And the kind of things they propose are the kind of things that may have previously have been delivered outside of IT through the business, so you're capturing those. But then you can move forward with a holistic approach to what's going on with innovation, and then bring it through, bring the key ideas or the key pieces of change you want to as part of the strategy, and then you're back into the top layer of the process here. So this is the ideas and initiatives element up the top here. So I've tried to talk about ideas to delivery. The ideas being right at the top left here, delivery being down to how do we actually implement those work packages into our operations group, and looking at strategic planning, enterprise architecture, strategic planning underpinning enterprise architecture underpinning strategic planning as part of that element to connect. So we used to call it strategic planning for IT, but it's whatever you want to call it. It does allow us to bind the EA, the demand management from ideas and the solution delivery together. So that means that we're going to understand a little bit more about what's going on in the organisation, have some means of governing what we deliver against those needs, and adapt to IT to support that. It's all about decision making. Again, strategic planning is about decision making. It's that solid information, solid foundation. That's your enterprise architecture, that solid foundation. And once you have those patterns and that model in place, you can assess the impact, and then using tools to communicate that and plan through roadmaps the portfolio you're going to build, and providing, along the way, providing the right people the right information to make the right decisions at the time. So that's probably there to be mature organisations, but we can all take strides in some way towards that. So in terms of summary, in terms of our enterprise architecture view, it's practice of strong governance, so what we wish. So to ensure that, that we actually make the right investment at the right time. So and that those investments are actually applied in the right order. So if we're connecting that enterprise architecture to planning, project management office, then we can start to those three elements together to provide a roadmap to deploy an architecture that actually gives us the new capabilities that we need. Okay, so ultimately, it's all about decision making, making good decisions at all levels, and that's why it's all about strategic planning. Okay, so that's, I guess, Dan, if I bring you back in now, Dan, so if there's any more questions.
Hi, Alan. Yep, so thanks for that. Good presentation. Let me just check if there's a few questions in. I think I saw some coming in a little bit earlier. If you do have a question, now is the time to submit it into the question box. Okay, so first question. In order to start with an EA program, is it necessary to buy a tool for supporting the program?
For me, alas, no. You can start without a tool. In fact, for me, you need several key things. You need the people in place, you need the process, and you need the tool. You don't need all of them together. What you need to start building a practice, and I guess what you need is some idea of building. And this is what we work with. We work with Centre of Excellences without tools and with tools. But it's about getting the right people and process in place and getting a buy-in at a certain level to start building that practice out. And then you'll need tooling to support you as you start to ramp that up and start to do the heavy lifting, if you like, of the elements. And that's why, quite often we get, when we get involved, it's with people that built models in spreadsheets and Visio want to move to tooling that they can roll out and do better analysis on, I guess, to get and collaborate with a broader range of stakeholders. That's the next stage in that. So I'd love to say yes, you have to have one, but yes, you probably don't.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a few more questions coming in, which is excellent. Okay, might catch you out here. Can you name some organisations at level 4 or level 5? I presume that was the maturity curve.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to name any organisations at any level, I'm afraid. But if you want to talk to us, if the person that asked the question wants to talk to us in more detail on an individual basis, then we have to discuss that with them. So that's my cop out. Sorry.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. In the framework that you present, where do you put a BSC effort?
A BSC. I have to elaborate on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Design. Okay.
Okay, we'll leave that one for a second. If you want to explain BSC, I can read it out again.
Is that business score? Is that BSC? Is that business scorecarding?
Yeah, BSC. Okay, we'll hold that one for a second.
We'll confirm, if you confirm that, and I'll come back and answer that question.
Yeah. Another question. Maybe can your tools show what was talked about today?
Yes. So you can do your manage innovation process. You can build architecture models. You can collaborate with groups of stakeholders, build roadmaps, build work packages, and then output that information or share that information with other tools that perhaps are around in the delivery space. So just about, yes.
Excellent. Coming back to that previous question, so BSC's balanced scorecard.
Balanced scorecard. It was that scorecard. Okay, yeah. So I thought it said something else.
Right, yeah. Yes. So in full, in the framework that you present, where do you put a balanced scorecard effort?
Yeah, so I guess that's in the same areas. Where do you put key performance indicators, and where do you put those sort of business metrics? They probably sit in enterprise architectures, but I guess you're probably trying to measure your strategy and goals in there. So that's actually probably an area where we don't really cover in our tool set, because there are some specialist tools about balanced scorecarding. But I would say it's probably in the goals and objectives and the models that you build around those strategic models there. So your kind of SWOT analysis type models that you fit up in that sort of goals. So let's just make it more. So there's vision, goal, and strategy. There's a whole bunch of tools that you use in this space, and then we take the feed from those into our enterprise architecture.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Next question. Where does ITSM fit into EA?
So what's the acronym again?
ITSM. Is that IT
service management?
Yes.
Service management, yeah. So the service management piece is probably then down more in functioning IT, so down in the delivery piece. So sort of the work to be done. So in terms of work packages, programs, and projects, then we're really trying to understand there what we want to deliver and when. In our enterprise architecture, we've probably got a notion of what types of object we want to work with at a fairly high level, but then there's down into the actual work to be done and the functioning organisation, if you like, where that's where we kind of link to other tools through our APIs. So kind of service management tools, ServiceNow, and lots of other tools in that space that allow you to understand the functioning organisation, what elements are out there. So that sort of sits down in this section. And again, we would take a feed from that, a sanitized feed from that, to try and understand what infrastructure is in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Next question. Well, another one might keep you on your toes here, Alan. What are the two factors that drive the success of enterprise architecture?
The two factors. Did you say? So
Yeah.
two factors.
What are the two factors? I guess if it is two.
Yeah. Probably. It's a good question, actually. So it's just to pick two. Buy-in would be one of them. So getting out there to get people to understand what you're trying to achieve and the value that it gives you. So there's a big political thing to there, and there's probably something aligned to that, which is collaboration, allowing you to keep your models up to date and relevant, so that people don't get fed up with things that are out of date. So that would certainly, if I could have dealt with both of those two in a lot of projects, then they would have been perhaps more successful than they were. Yeah.
Good answer. Makes sense. Okay, then the last question that we have, and I think it was in relation to maybe this slide that's showing now. What is the approach to EA governance?
Yeah, so I guess it's probably the next slide, actually. So for us, EA governance is around understanding those patterns and whether those patterns are being delivered. From a tooling perspective, I guess it's just allowing us to check on what gets delivered and what basically going to fit within the structure that is allowed, the patterns that we allow in our models. The bigger part of it really is the people, and the people that having a governance board that is, I guess, strong enough or with enough power to say that to make it happen. So you can have all the governance in the world. So that we should use this software or this application, this technology to deliver this. But if it's not done, what is the consequence of that? And that's what a governance board is really there to do. So it's really on the strength of the organisation. So from my perspective and a tooling perspective, then it's probably less of an issue apart from getting the right people in the right place. And again, when you go back to the centre of excellence and building those, a governance board is part of that group that buys into the centre of excellence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. I had another few questions come in, so I think we've still got some time, so we're gonna keep going here.
Yeah.
If an organisation feels reluctant to EA route, to the EA route, what alternatives are there for them?
So if they're reluctant to go down EA route, so it depends on what you mean by going down the EA route. So if it means it's reluctant to invest in a bunch of enterprise architects to work on models, then that's certainly, well, unless you can persuade some investment, then you're not going to get much further. So in that case, I guess you look at where you can make a difference. So in the maturity model, sort of level one was where you build. You're not necessarily doing full EA. Well, there is no EA. What you're doing is you're building the basis of an EA model that you can then use for things like application portfolio management or rationalization of portfolios, or just understanding what artifacts you have. So you can start from quite a low base. So you're not actually doing EA, but you kind of are. We see that quite a lot where people have built application inventory or technology inventory connected to the two. So they have some understanding and notion of how their IT works, but they're not going to affect the business necessarily but you can understand where you might get to save some money if you rationalize some elements. So it's focusing on other areas like application portfolio management, I guess process improvement, those sort of things. That's where you could go instead, and then start to build up your model that you could use in enterprise architecture. But I guess ultimately, if you don't, if there's no appetite for enterprise architecture team, then there won't be one. It's you've got to find another way of starting that process.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Another question here. As an enterprise architect, what will be your approach to deliver projects and how will you sell it? Waterfall or agile?
Well, for me being an enterprise architect, then delivery projects is not. I won't be delivering projects, but what I will be doing is suggesting principles and approaches. And if we're looking at an overarching view of where the world's going, then it's agile. So and we ourselves are now tools agile EA tools is meant to be around doing just enough architecture, and then but that's from building the architecture. And actually, how we're going to deliver projects and programs, then the guiding principle should be defined by the enterprise architects team, and that may well be agile moving forward.
Okay, excellent. And then, as we are at the moment, this is the final question. Why do you suggest the use of DevOps?
Well, we're using the term DevOps here as a good question. It's so we're just using DevOps here to represent just the operation, the functional organisation. We often find ourselves working with DevOps teams. That's what we choose that, but it's just how we chose to present that in our slide. It can represent a functional organisation. Somehow for us, it represents how we. You've got the working up the operating model of the company, and then we have to update that operating model with some change to the architecture. So we just couch that as DevOps.
Okay, excellent. And I think that's the last question, actually. So in terms of that, I think we're all done.
Great, cool. Well, I've left the next steps up there. Hopefully you can see that, Dan, and everybody.
Yeah.
And thanks for your time. And hopefully you got some value from it. Bye for now. See you at another webinar very soon.